Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore one of the oldest and most beautiful creation stories ever told. It's the story of Turtle Island, the sacred origin story of North America itself. Tonight, you'll discover how the entire world was born on the back of a giant turtle, how sky people fell from the heavens, and how brave animals dove deep into endless waters to create the land we walk on today. This isn't just any myth. This is a story that has been told for thousands of years, passed down through generations of indigenous peoples across the continent. Before we dive in, if stories like this help you relax and drift off to sleep, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And leave a comment below telling me which animal from tonight's story you would want to be. The brave muskrat who risked everything? The powerful turtle who carries the world? Or maybe the sky woman herself falling through the clouds? Let me know down in the comments. Now, let's begin our journey back to a time before time, to a moment before the world as we know it even existed. In the very beginning, there was no land at all. There was no earth beneath anyone's feet, no mountains rising toward the sky, no forests stretching across valleys. There was only water. Endless, dark water stretched in every direction as far as anyone could see or imagine. The water went on forever, deep and ancient and mysterious. But this water was not empty. Living in these endless waters were many animals, and these were not ordinary creatures. These were the first animals, the ancient ones who existed before the world took shape. They swam through the vast ocean, dove beneath the waves, and surfaced for air. They lived in harmony with each other because the water was all they had ever known. It was their home, their entire universe. High above this endless water, there existed another world entirely. This place was called the Sky World, and it was completely different from the dark waters below. The Sky World was a place of light and beauty, where sky people lived their lives among the clouds. These sky people had never seen the water below. They had never even imagined it existed. They walked on clouds and breathed the pure air of the heavens. In the center of the sky world stood a great tree, and this was no ordinary tree. This was the tree of life, the celestial tree. Some traditions call it by different names, but all agree on its importance. This sacred tree was ancient beyond measure, with roots that went deep into the sky itself and branches that reached even higher into the heavens. Its leaves glowed with a soft, ethereal light, and its flowers bloomed in colors that don't exist in our world. At the base of this tree, there was pure light, and this light fed and sustained the entire sky world. Now, in the sky world, there lived a woman known as Sky Woman. Some stories call her a Tenzik, while others know her as the Sky Mother or the Ancient One. She was important in the sky world, and at this time she was pregnant, carrying twins within her. These twins would one day shape the entire world in ways she couldn't yet imagine, but for now she simply knew she was about to become a mother. One day, Sky Woman's husband had a powerful dream. In the sky world, dreams were never taken lightly because dreams revealed truth and showed glimpses of the future. In his dream, he saw that the great celestial tree must be uprooted and pulled from the ground. He didn't understand why this had to happen, and the dream didn't explain. But he knew with absolute certainty that the dream was showing him something important, something that had to be done. He told Sky Woman about his vision, and she was curious. She wanted to understand the meaning of this strange dream, so she went to the great tree to see it for herself. When she arrived, she placed her hand on its massive trunk and felt the power humming through its bark. Then her husband began the difficult work of uprooting it. He pulled and strained, and slowly, incredibly, the great tree began to move. Its ancient roots started to lift from the sky. When the tree was finally uprooted, something unexpected happened. Where the tree had stood, there was now a hole. A great opening that went down through the clouds and through the floor of the sky world itself. Sky Woman approached this hole carefully and peered down into it. For the first time in her life, she could see something beyond her world. She could see the dark water far below, stretching endlessly in all directions. She leaned forward to get a better look, curious about this strange new sight. She leaned closer, trying to see more, and then she lost her balance and fell. Sky Woman tumbled through the hole, falling away from the sky world and everything she had ever known. She spun through the air, plummeting down through the clouds toward the dark water below. As she fell, she instinctively reached out and grabbed at the edges of the hole, and her hands closed around seeds and roots from the great tree. She didn't know why she held on to them, but something told her they were important. So as she fell through the vast emptiness between worlds, she clutched these seeds tightly in her hands, falling and falling toward the endless water below. The water animals saw Sky Woman falling from above. They had never seen anything like this before. They had lived their entire lives in the endless waters, swimming and diving and surfacing, but they had never imagined that anything could exist beyond their watery world. Yet here was proof falling from the sky. Here was a being unlike any they had ever encountered, tumbling down through the air toward their domain. The animals gathered quickly, calling to each other across the waves. They could see that Sky Woman would not survive if she hit the water from such a great height. The fall from the sky world was so far that the impact would surely harm her, and besides, they could tell she was not made for life in the water like they were. She would drown in their endless ocean. Something had to be done, and it had to be done quickly. The great birds were the first to act. The wild geese, powerful and swift, flew up into the air to meet Sky Woman as she fell. They spread their wings wide and positioned themselves beneath her, working together to slow her descent. Their strong wings beat against the air as they carefully caught her on their backs. The geese called out to their relatives, and soon swans joined them, then ducks, then all manner of water birds. Together they supported Sky Woman on their wings, carrying her gently down toward the surface of the water. But even as the birds helped Sky Woman, a new problem became clear to all the animals watching from below. Sky Woman was a land creature. They could see this clearly now that she was closer. She needed solid ground to stand on, and there was no solid ground anywhere in their world. There was only water, endless and deep. The animals realized they faced an impossible challenge. How could they help this sky being when everything she needed simply didn't exist? It was Old Turtle who spoke first. Old Turtle was ancient and wise, respected by all the water animals. His shell was vast and strong, worn smooth by countless years in the water. "I will help," Old Turtle said, his voice deep and slow like the movement of deep currents. "She can rest on my shell. I will carry her." The other animals looked at Old Turtle with gratitude and relief. His shell was indeed large enough to support Sky Woman, at least for a while. But Great Turtle understood something the others didn't yet realize. Sky Woman would need more than just a temporary resting place. She would need real earth, real soil to make a true home. And somewhere, deep beneath all this water, there had to be earth. There had to be soil at the bottom of the ocean, because where else could earth come from? The problem was that the water was deeper than any of them had ever gone. None of them knew how far down the bottom might be, or if they could even reach it. Beaver was the first to volunteer. Beaver was an excellent swimmer and could hold his breath longer than most animals. "I will dive down and bring back earth," he said confidently. The other animals watched as Beaver took a deep breath and disappeared beneath the surface. Down he went, swimming powerfully with his strong tail and webbed feet. He swam deeper than he had ever gone before, down through darker and darker water, until the pressure began to hurt his ears and his lungs burned for air. But still he swam deeper, determined to reach the bottom and find the earth that Sky Woman needed. Beaver swam until he couldn't swim anymore. His lungs were screaming for air, his body was exhausted, and still he had not reached the bottom. He had no choice but to turn around and swim back up. When he finally surfaced, gasping and exhausted, he had no earth to show for his efforts. He had failed. The other animals comforted him, telling him he had been brave to try, but they all knew the problem remained unsolved. Otter volunteered next. Otter was even more at home in the water than Beaver, sleek and fast and graceful. Surely if anyone could reach the bottom of the ocean, it would be Otter. The animals watched hopefully as Otter took his turn, diving down into the depths with powerful strokes of his streamlined body. Down and down he went, deeper than Beaver had managed, pushing himself to his absolute limits. The water grew colder and darker around him, and the pressure built until he felt like his head might burst. Still, he continued downward, believing he might be close to the bottom, determined not to give up like Beaver had been forced to do. But even Otter, for all his skill in the water, eventually reached his limit. His body simply could not go any deeper. The pressure was too great, the distance too far, his need for air too urgent. He turned and swam back up through the long darkness, emerging at the surface empty-handed and exhausted. Like Beaver before him, he had failed to bring back any earth. The animals began to worry. If Beaver and Otter, two of their finest swimmers, could not reach the bottom, who could? It was then that a small voice spoke up. "I will try." The voice belonged to Muskrat, and all the other animals turned to look at her in surprise. Muskrat was much smaller than Beaver or Otter. She was not as strong or as fast. Many of the animals thought it was hopeless for such a small creature to attempt what their stronger companions had failed to do. Some even tried to discourage her, telling her it was too dangerous, that she should let someone else try. But Muskrat was determined. "Size is not everything," she said quietly but firmly. "Sometimes the smallest among us can go where others cannot." There was something in her voice, a quiet confidence that made the other animals pause. Old Turtle, floating nearby with Sky Woman still resting on his great shell, looked at Muskrat with his ancient eyes. "Let her try," he said slowly. "The spirit chooses its own messengers." Muskrat took a deep breath and looked out over the vast, endless water. All the animals watched her, some with hope, some with worry. Muskrat knew what she had to do. She wasn't the fastest swimmer, or the strongest. She didn't have Otter's effortless grace or Beaver's tireless energy. But Muskrat possessed something else. She had perseverance. She had heart. She slipped quietly into the water. The surface rippled and closed behind her, and the world above faded as she started her descent. Muskrat dove deeper and deeper, the light of the surface fading away, the water growing colder and darker with every flick of her paws. It felt as if she was swimming down into a dream or into the memory of a world that had never truly known light. As Muskrat dove, she began to feel the weight of the water pressing against her small body. Her ears rang. Her lungs began to burn with the need for air. Every instinct inside her whispered that she should turn back, that no one could go this deep. But Muskrat pressed on, guided by the hope and the faith of all who had watched her dive, guided too by her quiet but unbreakable will. She thought of Sky Woman, waiting far above, needing earth if she was to survive. Muskrat thought of Old Turtle, steadfast on the surface, hoping she would be the one who succeeded where others had not. Muskrat's paws brushed against nothing but cold, dark water. She swam until it felt like she'd become a part of the deep itself, until time melted away and every thought was wrapped in darkness. Just as her body reached the very edge of endurance, Muskrat felt with her paw a new sensation, something solid. She reached out her tiny claws and scooped up a bit of earth from the very bottom of all the waters. In that moment, with her lungs aching and her heart pounding, Muskrat turned and began the long, difficult journey back to the surface. It was harder rising than it had been swimming down. The darkness clung to her. Her strength was fading. At last, just as her body could take no more, Muskrat broke through the water's surface. She floated, limp and exhausted, barely able to breathe. The other animals rushed to her side. They saw right away that she held something in her tiny paws. It was a small clump of dark, wet earth, just a scrap, barely enough to notice. But to the animals, it was the most precious thing in the world. They realized that Muskrat's journey, her courage and sacrifice, had made the impossible possible. She had done what Beaver and Otter and all the others could not do. Muskrat had brought earth up from the depths. Muskrat smiled, her quiet, tired smile, and drifted into a peaceful sleep as the animals celebrated what she had achieved. Old Turtle looked upon Muskrat with deep respect. Then he addressed Sky Woman, speaking carefully so his words wouldn't be lost in the wind. "Place the earth on my back," Old Turtle said. "I am strong and enduring. I will carry this earth so you may have a home." Sky Woman, still holding the seeds from the sky world and now gratefully accepting the precious earth, leaned down from Turtle's wide shell. With great care, she took the little clump of earth from Muskrat's paws and placed it gently onto Turtle's back. It was a small beginning, yet in that moment, the world itself began to change. Sky Woman knelt on Turtle's shell and started to spread the earth. Wherever she touched, the earth began to grow. With each stroke of her hand, the earth expanded softly at first, then more quickly, like ripples fanning out in a pond. The clump spread outward, covering more and more of Turtle's broad shell. It grew into hills and valleys, stones and soil, dry land where before there had been only water. The animals watched in wonder as the surface of Turtle's back grew larger and larger, transforming into a broad island. An island big enough for Sky Woman to stand upon, to walk, and in time, to plant the seeds from the sky world. The seeds she had carried with her all this way now found their new home. Sky Woman bent down and planted them in the rising earth. Each seed took root quickly, nourished by the magic of the sky world and by the hope and sacrifice that had made a place for them here. Green shoots broke through the soil. Trees began to grow beside rivers and lakes that formed from the water still rolling off Turtle's sides. Grasses rippled in gentle winds, flowers opened and perfumed the air. For the first time, new life covered what would become the land. As the earth continued to expand and blossom, the animals who had helped watched with joy and awe. They realized a new world was taking shape before their eyes, a place where land creatures and water dwellers alike would have a home, where Sky Woman would walk and create, and where the legend of their courageous journey and sacrifice would echo for generations to come. As dawn broke across Turtle Island, the very first light touched the new land. The animals felt its warmth and marveled at the transformation they had helped create. The water world was different now. It held a real island, a place where life could thrive beyond the boundaries of the ancient ocean. The air fluttered with birdsong, and the gentle lapping of waves sounded new, a lullaby for a world just waking up for the first time. Sky Woman stood quietly on Turtle's broad shell, feeling earth beneath her feet. She looked at the seeds she had planted, already sprouting and spreading green across the fresh soil. Trees reached toward the sky. Flowers opened with colors brighter than any she'd ever seen in the sky world. Everything felt filled with promise. She breathed deeply and closed her eyes, whispering gratitude to the spirits who had guided her down, and to Muskrat, Beaver, Otter, and Turtle, whose courage and generosity had made her new home possible. The animals gathered together on the edge of the land, looking at Sky Woman with awe and respect. Some found places to settle along the shore. Others swam in the new rivers and lakes. Birds circled and called to each other, swooping down from the air to explore the forests rising from Turtle's back. Even the smallest insects went about their mysterious work among the roots and blossoms, honoring the moment in their own way. Sky Woman saw that Turtle Island was beautiful, but empty of other beings like herself. She realized her journey was not finished. The world needed more life, new creatures, new stories, and new families to fill its rivers, forests, and valleys. So she began to walk the land, planting more seeds along the way. Each time her hands touched the earth, she whispered blessings learned in the sky world, a gentle prayer for harmony, for peace, for a world where all living things could thrive together. As she walked, tiny animals emerged from the grasses and flowers, mice and voles, rabbits and foxes. They blinked in the sunlight, amazed by the new world growing around them. Birds built nests in the branches above and sang in voices that carried through the leaves. Frogs croaked in the banks of the newborn ponds. The land filled with the sound of water flowing, of wind sighing through leaves, and the laughter of animal children discovering their home. Sky Woman knew she was lonely. She missed the sky world, missed the company of other sky people. But she also felt a deep sense of calm and purpose as she watched the land growing all around her. She understood she had a job to do. She could nurture this new world, care for it as it evolved, and teach the creatures who appeared how to live in harmony with the earth, water, and sky. One evening, as the sun set over the new horizon, Sky Woman looked up and saw the first stars appearing above Turtle Island, the same stars she remembered from the nights in the sky world. Their light was different here, softer and more mysterious. She realized she could tell stories about those stars, share old legends from the world above with her new companions below. In this way, Sky Woman made Turtle Island feel like home, not just for herself, but for every living being, every flower, tree, and animal that now belonged to the land. With each day that passed, Turtle Island grew more beautiful, more vibrant, and more alive. The animals continued to explore, learning from one another and from Sky Woman, who served as a gentle guide and mother to all. The island itself seemed to breathe and grow, expanding its forests and meadows, shaping its hills and rivers. The legend of Turtle Island was young, but it already held within it the seeds of thousands of stories to come. And so, as the first dawn faded into morning, Turtle Island began a new life, connected to the ancient waters, rooted in sacrifice and courage, and blooming beneath the sky that had once been so far away. The world was changing, and for now, every heart on Turtle Island beat with hope. Time passed peacefully on Turtle Island, and Sky Woman felt her body changing as the twins within her grew stronger. She could sense their different natures even before they were born. One moved gently, as if already in harmony with the rhythm of the world. The other was restless, pushing and struggling as if eager to emerge and change everything around him. Sky Woman walked the growing land each day, her hands resting on her growing belly, wondering what kind of children these would be and what they would bring to the new world. The animals of Turtle Island gathered around Sky Woman as her time approached. They had never witnessed the birth of Sky People before, and they sensed this would be no ordinary event. The birds sang more sweetly in the days leading up to the birth. The flowers bloomed more brilliantly. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something momentous to happen. Old Turtle, still carrying the entire world on his shell, moved more slowly and carefully, as if he too understood the importance of what was about to occur. When Sky Woman's labor began, it was unlike anything the animals had ever seen. The very earth seemed to respond to her pain and effort. The trees swayed without wind, the rivers ran more quietly. Lightning flickered in the distance without any storm clouds, and thunder rumbled gently like the heartbeat of the world itself. Sky Woman found a soft place beneath the great tree that had grown from the first seeds she planted, and there she prepared to bring her children into the world. The first twin was born as the sun reached its highest point in the sky. He emerged easily, as if he had been waiting patiently for just the right moment. The animals saw immediately that this child was special. His skin seemed to glow with a soft, warm light. His eyes were gentle and curious, taking in the world around him with wonder rather than fear. When he opened his mouth, instead of crying, he made a sound like wind through grass, like water over stones, like the first bird song of morning. Sky Woman looked at her firstborn son and knew he would be a creator, a builder, a being who would add beauty and harmony to the world. She named him Sapling, though different tribes would come to know him by different names. Some called him the Good Twin, others the Right-Handed Twin, and still others knew him as the Creator. But Sky Woman simply called him Sapling because she could see he would grow straight and tall and strong, like the young trees spreading across Turtle Island. But the second twin did not come so easily. As evening approached and the first stars appeared, Sky Woman's labor grew more difficult. The second twin seemed to be fighting his way into the world, unwilling to be born in the natural way. The animals grew worried as they watched Sky Woman struggle. Her face was pale with exhaustion, and still the second twin would not come. Finally, as the moon rose full and bright overhead, the second twin burst forth not through the natural passage, but through his mother's side, tearing his way into the world with a violence that shocked all who witnessed it. The birth of the second twin changed everything. As he emerged from his mother's side, Sky Woman's strength left her forever. She had given all of her life force to bring her children into the world, and now, as she held both twins against her chest, she felt herself growing weak. The animals gathered closer, sensing that something terrible was happening. Sky Woman's breathing grew shallow. Her warm glow began to fade. She was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. With her last breath, Sky Woman whispered names for her sons and instructions for their care. She told the animals to watch over both children, to help them learn about the world, and to keep them safe as they grew. Then she closed her eyes and became still. Sky Woman, who had fallen from the sky world and given birth to Turtle Island's first human inhabitants, died as gently as a candle flame being blown out by the wind. The animals mourned deeply for Sky Woman. They had loved her kindness, her gentle wisdom, and the way she had helped make their world more beautiful. But even in their grief, they noticed something remarkable happening. Where Sky Woman's body lay, new plants began to grow immediately. From her heart grew tobacco, sacred and powerful. From her hands grew corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters that would one day feed nations of people. From her feet grew sweet grass and sage and cedar, plants that would become sacred to her descendants. Sky Woman's death had brought forth the gifts that would sustain life on Turtle Island for generations to come. The second twin, who had caused his mother's death by his violent birth, was very different from his gentle brother. His skin was dark and rough. His eyes burned with a fierce intelligence, but also with anger and a hunger for change. When he cried, it sounded like wind before a storm, like rocks grinding against each other, like the call of predators in the night. The animals could see that this twin would be trouble, but they had promised Sky Woman they would care for both her children, so they did their best to love him too. Sky Woman's grandmother, who lived in the sky world above, looked down through the hole in the clouds and saw what had happened. She was filled with grief for her granddaughter, but also with love for the twin boys who were now orphans on the growing island below. So she reached down through the hole and gathered Sky Woman's spirit to herself, bringing her granddaughter home to the sky world where she could rest in peace. But she also sent down her blessings to the twins, along with the promise that their mother would always watch over Turtle Island from her new home among the stars. The animals of Turtle Island took on the task of raising the twin boys with great care and devotion. They had promised Sky Woman they would watch over her children, and they intended to keep that promise despite the challenges ahead. The twins were unlike any creatures the animals had ever encountered before, and raising them required wisdom, patience, and constant attention. Sapling, the first twin, was a joy to care for. He was curious about everything around him, but never destructive. When the deer showed him how to run through the forest, he ran gracefully, never breaking branches or disturbing the smaller creatures in his path. When the birds taught him their songs, he learned quickly and sang back to them in harmonious melodies that made the flowers bloom more brightly. When the fish showed him how to swim in the clear streams and lakes, he moved through the water like he belonged there, never muddying the banks or frightening the other water creatures. The animals loved teaching Sapling because he approached everything with wonder and respect. When Grandmother Spider showed him how she wove her webs, catching the morning dew in patterns of perfect beauty, Sapling watched with fascination and asked thoughtful questions. He wanted to understand not just how things worked, but why they were important, how they fit into the larger harmony of the world. Bear taught him which berries were good to eat and which plants could heal injuries. Eagle showed him the island from high above, pointing out the way the rivers flowed and how the forests connected to each other across the land. But the second twin was much more difficult to raise. Even as a small child, he seemed driven by restless energy and dissatisfaction with the world as it was. The animals tried their best to teach him the same lessons they taught Sapling, but he responded very differently. When the deer tried to show him how to run gracefully through the forest, he crashed through the undergrowth, snapping branches and scaring smaller animals. He seemed to take pleasure in the destruction he caused. When the birds tried to teach him their songs, he learned them quickly, but then sang them back in harsh, discordant versions that made the flowers wilt and the young animals hide in fear. When the fish showed him how to swim, he thrashed about in the water, stirring up mud and chasing the other creatures away from their peaceful schools. The animals began to worry about this second twin, though they continued trying to love him as they had promised Sky Woman they would. The second twin, who came to be called Flint, seemed to understand that he was different from his brother, and this knowledge made him even more difficult to handle. He watched Sapling succeed at everything he tried, watched the animals praise his gentle brother for his wisdom and kindness, and Flint's heart grew bitter with jealousy and resentment. Why should Sapling be the one everyone loved? Why should his brother be the one who learned everything easily while Flint struggled to find his place in the world? As the twins grew older, their differences became even more pronounced. Sapling spent his days creating beautiful things. He learned to shape clay into vessels that could hold water without leaking, and he decorated them with patterns that told stories of the animals who had helped raise him. He wove grass into baskets so perfect they seemed to sing when the wind blew through them. He carved wood into tools that were both useful and beautiful, each one a work of art that made life easier for the creatures of Turtle Island. Flint, on the other hand, seemed drawn to changing things in ways that weren't always helpful. He discovered he could make fire by striking rocks together, but instead of using this gift to provide warmth and light, he sometimes set fires that burned out of control, forcing the animals to work together to prevent the flames from destroying their homes. He learned to chip stones into sharp edges, creating tools that cut and scraped effectively, but he seemed to take particular pleasure in making weapons, spears, and knives that could harm as well as help. The animals tried to guide both twins toward wisdom and balance, but they could see that Sapling and Flint were developing into very different kinds of beings. Sapling seemed to instinctively understand that his purpose was to help the world flourish, to create beauty and harmony wherever he went. Flint appeared to believe his role was to challenge everything, to test the strength of what his brother built, to introduce conflict and change into what might otherwise become too peaceful and static. Old Turtle, who had carried the world on his back through all these years of growth and change, spoke to the other animals about the twins one evening as they gathered at the water's edge. "Both children are part of Sky Woman's gift to this world," he said slowly, his ancient voice carrying the wisdom of ages. "We must not favor one over the other, even though one seems easier to love. The world needs both creation and change, both harmony and challenge. Our task is to help both twins find their proper place in the balance of all things." The animals listened to Old Turtle's words and tried to apply his wisdom, but as the twins continued to grow and their powers continued to develop, it became increasingly clear that Sapling and Flint were destined for something much larger than simple childhood lessons. The peaceful days of their youth were drawing to a close, and the real work of shaping Turtle Island was about to begin. As the twins matured, their differences grew sharper, echoing through Turtle Island like thunder rolling over the hills. Sapling, ever gentle and thoughtful, continued shaping the world with care. Every valley he carved was curving and soft, a place for rivers to flow peacefully. When he raised forests, he placed the trees so sunlight could reach the ground, and every animal would have shelter and food. Sapling was happiest when the world thrived in balance, and every creature, plant, and stone seemed woven into a harmonious pattern. Flint watched his brother's work with a scowl, convinced that the world was too soft, too easy, too perfect. A part of Flint seemed to crave struggle, obstacles, and change. He wanted Turtle Island to be stronger, tougher, more challenging for those who lived upon it. Where Sapling saw beauty, Flint often saw fragility, something worth testing, maybe even breaking, just to see what would happen. Flint felt driven by a restless spirit that burned within him and made him question everything. The animals felt the tension. When Sapling and Flint played together as boys, their games were innocent enough, racing through floodplains, climbing rocks, chasing birds. But as they aged, their play turned into competition, and competition into conflict. Sapling would build a dam of stones to make a gentle pond, and Flint would tear it down, scoffing, "If this world can't survive a simple push, what good is it?" Sapling would plant a new grove of berry bushes, and Flint would scatter rocks among the roots or snap the stems, daring the plants to recover. The birds and turtles and bears grew anxious, worried that the two forces at work in the world were starting to threaten everything they'd built together. Wise old Turtle called the twins to his side and tried to mediate. "Creation and destruction are both needed," he rumbled, "but too much of either will lead us to sorrow." Sapling nodded, always respectful, but Flint scoffed at old Turtle's words, convinced the world needed testing, not warnings and advice. The twins' powers continued to grow. Sapling seemed able to coax life from even the poorest soil. Flint discovered he could summon storms, shattering trees with lightning or driving winds so strong that rivers changed course. Where Sapling's touch healed, Flint's brought pain. When Sapling encouraged the animals to settle in new places, Flint drove some away, pushing them to find new homes on rocky highlands or barren ridges. Sometimes the twins worked side by side. Sapling would create a lush meadow, and Flint would add rocks and thorn bushes, making a challenge for any who wanted to cross. When Sapling made gentle hills, Flint swept them into rugged mountains, bristling with cliffs and scree, echoing his desire for strength and adversity. The world began to show the marks of both gentle valleys and sharp ridges, rivers that twisted through forests and crashed through gorges. Despite their rivalry, the twins were never quite enemies. Their relationship was complex, sometimes adversarial, sometimes grudgingly cooperative. Sapling did not hate Flint, and Flint did not hate Sapling. Each recognized, in some deep way, their need for the other, even when they quarreled bitterly. Many evenings found them sitting together beside the fire, silent and watchful as the stars rose above Turtle Island, each twin contemplating the changes wrought by the other. The animals learned to adapt. Deer flourished in the meadows Sapling made and grew tougher in the rocky uplands Flint shaped. Bears found berries in fertile groves but became skilled climbers among cliffs. Birds nested in easy tree hollows but learned to hide eggs among thorns and stones. Even the smallest insects and fish found niches in the world, thriving in places shaped by both twins, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in response to adversity. As seasons passed, Turtle Island grew larger, richer, and more varied than anyone had imagined. The world was not soft or unchanging, nor harsh and barren. It was a place that held both comfort and challenge, beauty and danger. It was alive in every sense, shaped by struggle and cooperation, by creation and destruction, by the hands and hearts of two brothers with opposing spirits. But wise old Turtle saw that the twins' rivalry was reaching a new, uncertain stage. Once, Turtle thought, they simply argued. Now, their work has changed the very bones of the world. Soon, they may not just remake the land, they may begin to fight for its future. As night fell on Turtle Island, stars flickered above water and trees. The world was beautiful, and the twins were restless. Quiet animals curled beneath leaves or perched in hollow logs, listening to the distant thunder. A warning that more change was yet to come, and the saga of the twins was only growing deeper. The tension between the twins had been building for years, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Every day brought new disagreements about how the world should be shaped. Sapling wanted rivers that flowed gently, nourishing the land as they passed. Flint insisted rivers should carve deep canyons and rush with dangerous rapids that would test anyone who dared to cross them. Sapling created forests with clearings where animals could graze peacefully. Flint filled those same forests with thorny undergrowth and steep ravines that made travel difficult and dangerous. The animals watched this growing conflict with increasing concern. They could see that both twins had important gifts to offer the world, but their constant opposition was beginning to tear at the very fabric of Turtle Island. Meadows would bloom under Sapling's care, only to be scorched by Flint's lightning. Mountains that Flint raised with pride would be softened by Sapling's patient touch, their sharp edges worn away by gentle rains and creeping vines. One morning, as the sun rose over Turtle Island, Flint approached his brother with a proposal that would change everything. "We cannot continue like this," Flint said, his voice carrying the sound of grinding stone. "Every day we undo each other's work. Every night we argue about what tomorrow should bring. This world will never be finished if we keep fighting over every hill and stream." Sapling looked up from the flowers he was tending, their petals glowing softly in the morning light. He had been thinking the same thing. "What do you suggest, brother?" he asked, though he could already see the fierce determination in Flint's dark eyes. "A contest," Flint replied. "We will each create our own vision of what this world should be. Whichever one proves superior will become the true pattern for all of Turtle Island. The loser will step aside and let the winner shape the world according to his will." Flint's proposal was bold and dangerous, but it offered something both twins desperately wanted, a chance to settle their differences once and for all. Sapling considered his brother's words carefully. He did not relish conflict, but he could see that Flint was right about one thing. Their constant opposition was preventing either of them from completing their work. Perhaps it would be better to have a clear resolution, even if it meant one of them would have to accept defeat. "Very well," Sapling agreed. "But let us set rules for this contest. We should each have equal time and equal space to work, and the animals of Turtle Island should judge which creation serves the world better." The twins spent several days establishing the terms of their great contest. They would each take one half of a large, uninhabited section of Turtle Island. For one full season, they would work without interfering with each other, creating their ideal versions of what the world should be. At the end of the season, the animals would explore both halves and decide which one better served the needs of all living things. Flint claimed the eastern half of the contest area, where the sun rose each morning. He wanted his creation to be touched by the first light of each new day, symbolizing his belief that the world needed constant challenge and renewal. Sapling took the western half, where the sun set each evening, feeling drawn to the peaceful beauty of twilight and the gentle transition from day to night. As soon as the contest began, the differences in their approaches became dramatically clear. Flint threw himself into his work with fierce energy, reshaping the land with bold, dramatic strokes. He raised jagged mountain peaks that scraped the sky, their slopes so steep that only the most determined climbers could reach their summits. He carved deep chasms where rivers roared through narrow gorges, their waters white with foam and spray. In Flint's territory, every landscape feature was a test, a challenge, a call to struggle and grow stronger through adversity. The plants that grew in Flint's domain were tough and resilient. Thorny bushes clustered on the mountainsides, their berries small but intensely flavorful, rewards for those brave enough to push through the painful brambles. Trees grew gnarled and twisted, their roots finding purchase in the smallest cracks in stone, their branches reaching desperately toward patches of sunlight that filtered through the rocky landscape. Even the grass was coarse and sharp, demanding respect from any creature that tried to graze upon it. Meanwhile, in the western half of the contest area, Sapling worked with his characteristic patience and care. He shaped rolling hills that invited exploration, their slopes gentle enough for even the smallest animals to climb with ease. His rivers meandered through the landscape like silver ribbons, creating oxbow lakes and wetlands where countless species could flourish. Every valley seemed designed as a natural amphitheater where bird songs would echo and carry across the land. Sapling's plants grew in abundance and variety. Fruit trees heavy with sweet apples, pears, and cherries dotted the hillsides. Berry bushes clustered in sunny clearings, their branches so heavy with fruit that they bent nearly to the ground. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows in every color imaginable, their blooms lasting from early spring through late autumn. Even the grass in Sapling's territory was soft and inviting, perfect for afternoon naps or evening gatherings under the stars. As the season progressed, word of the contest spread throughout Turtle Island. Animals came from far and wide to observe the twins at work, marveling at the completely different worlds taking shape on either side of the invisible line that divided the contest area. Some animals found themselves drawn to Flint's challenging landscape, excited by the adventure and strength it demanded. Others preferred Sapling's gentle paradise, where life seemed easy and abundant. As the contest season drew to a close, animals from every corner of Turtle Island gathered to witness the judging. They came in great migrations, herds of deer picking their way carefully through the forests, flocks of birds darkening the sky with their numbers, schools of fish swimming up the rivers from distant lakes. Even the smallest creatures joined the procession. Mice and voles, beetles and butterflies, frogs and salamanders all came to see what the twins had created and to participate in the great decision that would shape their world forever. Old Turtle, now ancient beyond measure, slowly made his way to the boundary between the two territories. His shell bore the marks of countless seasons, and moss grew in the deepest grooves of his weathered carapace. The other animals looked to him for guidance, knowing that his wisdom came from having carried the world through all its changes since the very beginning. "We must judge fairly," Old Turtle announced, his voice carrying across the assembled multitude. "We will spend equal time in each territory, observing not just beauty or strength, but how well each serves the needs of all living things." The animals began their exploration in Flint's eastern territory. As they climbed the jagged peaks and navigated the rushing rivers, many found themselves invigorated by the challenge. The young and strong delighted in testing themselves against the difficult terrain. Mountain goats leaped fearlessly from cliff to cliff, their hooves finding purchase on the smallest ledges. Eagles soared on the fierce updrafts that rose from the heated stone, calling out in voices that echoed dramatically through the canyons. But other animals struggled in Flint's landscape. The elderly moved slowly and painfully across the rough ground, their joints aching from the constant climbing and scrambling. Baby animals fell behind their parents, unable to keep up with the demanding pace that the terrain required. The thorny vegetation caught in their fur and feathers, leaving many creatures scraped and bleeding. While some animals thrived on the challenge, others found it exhausting and sometimes dangerous. The variety of life in Flint's territory was impressive but harsh. The berries that grew among the thorns were incredibly nutritious, packed with vitamins and minerals that could sustain life through the hardest winters. The trees that managed to survive in the rocky soil grew slowly but developed wood so strong it could withstand the fiercest storms. Every plant and every landscape feature seemed designed to create strength through struggle, beauty through endurance. When the animals moved into Sapling's western territory, the contrast was immediately apparent. The gentle hills welcomed creatures of all ages and abilities. Elderly animals could graze comfortably in the soft meadows without strain. Baby animals played safely in the shallow streams and flower-filled clearings. The abundant food sources meant that no creature went hungry, and the mild climate allowed even the most delicate species to flourish year-round. In Sapling's domain, diversity bloomed everywhere the animals looked. Hundreds of different wildflowers created a tapestry of color that changed with the seasons. Fruit trees offered sweet rewards without demanding dangerous climbs or painful encounters with thorns. The rivers were clean and slow-moving, perfect for drinking and bathing. Every element of the landscape seemed designed to support life in comfort and abundance. Yet some of the animals began to notice something troubling about Sapling's paradise. The abundance was so complete that many creatures were becoming soft and lazy. Young animals never learned to be truly cautious because there was no real danger to teach them wariness. The easy availability of food meant that some species were growing beyond their natural limits, potentially overwhelming the resources that supported them. The very perfection of the place seemed to lack something essential, the tension and challenge that kept life sharp and vital. As the judging period continued, the animals found themselves deeply divided. The strong and adventurous preferred Flint's challenging landscape, arguing that it brought out the best in every creature, forcing them to grow and adapt and become more than they had ever imagined possible. The gentle and nurturing preferred Sapling's abundant paradise, pointing out that it allowed all creatures to live in peace and comfort, free from unnecessary suffering and hardship. Old Turtle listened carefully to all the arguments, his ancient eyes watching both territories with the wisdom of one who had seen the world grow from a handful of mud into a vast and complex island. He could see the merits of both approaches, but he could also see the problems inherent in each. Flint's world was strong but harsh, potentially excluding those who were not naturally resilient. Sapling's world was beautiful, but perhaps too perfect, lacking the challenges that drove growth and adaptation. The other animals grew increasingly frustrated as the debate continued. Some began to argue fiercely with each other, defending their preferences with a passion that surprised even themselves. Friendships that had lasted for generations began to strain under the weight of conflicting opinions. The contest that was supposed to settle the twins' differences was instead creating new divisions among the very creatures who were meant to judge it. Finally, after many days of discussion and debate, Old Turtle called for silence. The assembled animals turned to him expectantly, hoping he would announce a clear winner that would end the controversy once and for all. But Old Turtle's words surprised everyone. "I have seen both territories," he said slowly. "I have listened to all your arguments, and I have reached a conclusion that may displease both twins, but which serves the needs of all life on Turtle Island." The crowd waited breathlessly for his judgment, knowing that whatever Old Turtle decided would become the pattern for their world forever. Old Turtle looked slowly from Sapling to Flint, his gaze carrying the weight of every season, every story, every moment since Turtle Island first rose above the water. He took a deep breath and spoke, so that all gathered could hear, even the smallest insects and the birds flying overhead. "This world cannot belong to just one vision. The challenges created by Flint make us strong, and the peace created by Sapling helps us flourish. Life needs both. Without hardship, we would forget courage and wisdom. Without abundance and gentleness, we would never know true rest or kindness. The world must have both, strength and softness, trial and comfort, night and day, storm and calm. That is how Turtle Island will endure." The animals listened, the tension slowly easing from their bodies as they heard the wisdom in Old Turtle's words. Even those who had been arguing stopped to look at one another with new understanding. Some nodded, thinking of the struggles that had shaped them into what they'd become. Others smiled, remembering the joy that peace and plenty brought to every leaf and feather and hoof. Sapling listened with humility. He had never desired to rule alone. His wish had always been for harmony. Deep within, he felt relief that the contest would end not in his brother's defeat, but in a recognition of the necessity of both their gifts. He looked at Flint and saw not a rival, but someone who balanced and tested him. Someone whose presence forced creation to stretch and reach its highest potential. Flint, for his part, felt pride that his vision of challenge was valued, but something in him softened at Old Turtle's words. He had always thought in terms of struggle and conquest, but even Flint saw that alone. His world would be too hard, too empty, too lonely. In the space beside his brother, a hint of respect began to flicker, a realization that even thunder eventually gives way to sunlight and every storm must end in peace. Old Turtle continued. "Let the world be made from both your visions. Let hills and valleys, soft meadows and rugged cliffs, thorn and flower, storm and sunshine all exist together. This will be the spirit of Turtle Island. No part shall be wholly easy or wholly hard. Let every creature learn from challenge and rest in comfort, moving between them as the seasons turn." From that day forward, the world shifted. The boundaries between Sapling's and Flint's lands faded. The gentle meadows found stony outcrops. The wild rivers softened into calm lakes at certain bends, while placid streams sometimes tumbled over sudden falls. Sapling and Flint, now no longer contestant and rival, but partners in balance, walked the world together. Where one planted a grove, the other might plant a rocky ridge. Where one set a challenge, the other followed with shelter or healing. Turtle Island grew fully alive, a place of constant change held together by opposites. The animals learned to accept both struggle and ease. They grazed the soft fields but crossed Flint's ridges with new skill. They took shelter in Sapling's forests when the storms came, knowing those storms would pass. Even the smallest creatures, those who might have perished in a world made only for the strong, found clever ways to thrive in the cracks and hidden places where the two brothers' influences met. As the seasons continued their rounds, spring blooming into summer, summer fading into fall, fall sleeping into winter, the story of Sapling and Flint became part of every creature's memory. It was told in the howling of wolves, in the hush of falling snow, in the first crocus pushing through late frost, and in the distant thunder rumbling behind the hills. They remembered not just the contest, but its lesson, that Turtle Island was not meant for one alone, but for the balance between them. Old Turtle, proud and weary, watched this new harmony unfold. Far above, Sky Woman's spirit looked down, seeing her son's work and the world shaped by both their hands. She saw the land she had helped create continue to change, thrive, and deepen, a place where stories and life would always continue, season after season, as long as the world endured. Years passed on Turtle Island, and the world grew richer with each turning season. The balance between Sapling and Flint's influences created landscapes of breathtaking variety and complexity. Forests stretched across rolling hills, interrupted by meadows where wildflowers bloomed in brilliant profusion. Rivers carved their way through gentle valleys and dramatic gorges, creating waterfalls that sparkled in the sunlight and quiet pools where fish swam in lazy circles. Mountains rose toward the sky, their peaks sometimes gentle and rounded, sometimes sharp and forbidding, offering both challenge and shelter to the countless creatures that made their homes among the rocks and trees. But as Turtle Island flourished, Sapling began to feel that something was still missing from their creation. The animals were wonderful companions, each species bringing its own gifts and wisdom to the world. The plants provided beauty, medicine, and sustenance. The landscapes offered endless variety and wonder. Yet Sapling sensed an emptiness, a place where another kind of life could take root and grow. He spoke to his brother about this feeling, and surprisingly, Flint agreed that their work was not yet complete. "The world needs beings who can choose," Flint said, his voice carrying the rumble of distant thunder. "The animals follow their nature, the plants grow where they are planted. But this world would be more interesting with creatures who could decide their own path, who could choose between challenge and comfort, between creation and destruction." Sapling nodded thoughtfully. Beings who could carry stories, who could remember the past and dream of the future, creatures who could appreciate beauty not just with their senses, but with their hearts and minds. The more the brothers talked, the more excited they became about this new possibility. They would create people, beings like their mother Sky Woman, but adapted to life on Turtle Island. The twins began their work carefully, knowing that these new creatures would be different from anything they had made before. They gathered clay from the riverbanks, mixing earth from both gentle valleys and challenging mountainsides. They added water from clear streams and powerful waterfalls. They breathed into the clay some of their own spirit, some of their mother's wisdom, and some of the courage they had learned from the animals who had raised them. The first people emerged from this clay as the sun set on a perfect autumn evening. They opened their eyes to see the world painted in shades of gold and crimson, with the first stars beginning to twinkle overhead. These first humans were beautiful and strong, curious and intelligent. They had Sapling's capacity for creation and nurturing, and Flint's drive to explore and overcome obstacles. They could choose to be gentle or fierce, depending on what the situation required. The animals gathered to welcome these new beings to Turtle Island. Bear showed them which berries were safe to eat and which roots could heal illness. Wolf taught them to hunt cooperatively and to care for their families. Eagle carried them high above the trees so they could see the vast expanse of their new home. Beaver demonstrated how to build shelters that could withstand storms and floods. Each animal shared its special knowledge, helping the first people learn to live successfully on Turtle Island. The twins watched with pride as the first people adapted to their new world. They learned quickly, showing remarkable ability to use both their hands and their minds to solve problems. They fashioned tools from stone and wood, wove baskets from grasses and reeds, and discovered how to make fire to keep themselves warm during the cold months. They developed language, creating words not just for practical things but for beauty, for feelings, for ideas that had no physical form. But perhaps most importantly, the first people learned to tell stories. Around their evening fires, they shared tales of their daily adventures, of the animals they had met, of the wonders they had discovered. They told stories about Sapling and Flint, about Sky Woman's fall from the heavens, about brave little Muskrat diving to the bottom of the endless water to bring up the first earth. These stories became precious treasures, passed from parents to children, growing richer and more detailed with each telling. The first people also learned to make choices, just as the twins had hoped. Some chose to live in the gentle valleys, building peaceful communities where they could focus on growing crops and creating beautiful things. Others preferred the challenging mountainous regions, becoming skilled hunters and explorers who thrived on adventure and hardship. Most moved between different areas as the seasons changed, learning to appreciate both the comfort and the challenges that Turtle Island offered. As the first people spread across the island, they developed different ways of life while maintaining their connection to the land and to each other. Some became farmers, learning to work with Sapling's gifts of corn, beans, and squash that still grew wild in certain places. Others became nomadic hunters, following the great herds across the plains and through the forests. Still others became traders, traveling great distances to exchange goods and stories with distant communities. The twins observed these developments with fascination. They had created beings capable of incredible diversity while still sharing common bonds. The first people could adapt to almost any environment on Turtle Island, but they never forgot their origin story or their responsibility to care for the world that sustained them. They understood that they were part of the balance between creation and challenge, that they had the power to be either healers or destroyers, and that their choices would shape not just their own lives, but the future of all life on Turtle Island. As the first people settled into life on Turtle Island, they felt a deep need to honor the forces that had created their world. They remembered the stories of Sky Woman's sacrifice, of brave Muskrat's dive to the bottom of the endless water, of Old Turtle's willingness to carry the world on his shell. They understood that their existence was part of an intricate web of relationships stretching back to the very beginning of time, and they wanted to express their gratitude in meaningful ways. The people began to develop ceremonies that connected them to the sacred story of their origins. They created special rituals to honor the four directions, recognizing that each direction held its own power and wisdom. To the east, where the sun rose each morning, they offered prayers for new beginnings and fresh hope. To the south, where the sun warmed the earth at midday, they gave thanks for growth and abundance. To the west, where the sun set each evening, they honored the wisdom that came with age and experience. To the north, where cold winds brought winter's challenges, they acknowledged the strength that came through endurance and survival. At the center of their ceremonies, the people always acknowledged Turtle Island itself, remembering that they stood upon the shell of the great turtle who had volunteered to carry the world. They would place tobacco on the earth as an offering, letting its smoke rise to the sky world where their mother's spirit watched over them. They understood that tobacco was sacred because it had grown from Sky Woman's heart, and its smoke could carry their prayers and gratitude to the spirit realm. Sapling and Flint watched these ceremonies with deep satisfaction. The first people had learned not just to survive on Turtle Island, but to live in conscious relationship with all the forces that sustained them. They recognized their dependence on the plants and animals, on the earth and water, on the sun and moon and stars. Most importantly, they understood that their own actions had consequences, that they were not separate from the natural world, but part of it. As the seasons turned and the first people multiplied, their ceremonies became more elaborate and specific. They developed rituals to mark the changing seasons, understanding that each transition brought new opportunities and challenges. In spring, they held planting ceremonies, asking Sapling to bless their seeds and help their crops grow strong. They honored the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, that had grown from Sky Woman's body, understanding that these plants would be their primary sustenance. During summer, the people held ceremonies of thanksgiving, celebrating the abundance that surrounded them. They honored the berries and wild plants that Sapling had scattered across the landscape, and they acknowledged Flint's challenges that made them strong enough to harvest and preserve food for the difficult months ahead. Children learned to identify medicinal plants and to understand which ones could heal different ailments, knowledge that had been passed down from bear and other animal teachers. As autumn arrived with its brilliant colors and cooler temperatures, the people held harvest ceremonies that lasted for days. They gave thanks not just for the food they had gathered, but for the lessons they had learned throughout the growing season. They shared stories of their ancestors, ensuring that the sacred knowledge would pass from one generation to the next. These autumn ceremonies became times of great joy and community, when people from distant settlements would travel great distances to gather together. Winter ceremonies were quieter and more introspective. During the long, cold months when Flint's influence was strongest, the people gathered around fires to tell the old stories over and over again. Children learned about Sky Woman's fall from the heavens, about the animals who had helped create Turtle Island, about the twins whose different gifts had shaped the world. These winter storytelling sessions were sacred times when the deepest wisdom was passed from elders to youth. The people also developed ceremonies specifically to honor the animals who shared Turtle Island with them. Before any hunt, they held rituals asking permission from the animal spirits and promising to use every part of any creature they killed, wasting nothing. They understood that taking a life was a serious responsibility, one that required gratitude and respect. After successful hunts, they held ceremonies of thanksgiving, offering portions of their kill back to the earth and asking forgiveness from the spirits of the animals they had taken. Throughout all their ceremonies, the people maintained a strong connection to the water that surrounded and sustained Turtle Island. They understood that water was the first element, the primordial source from which all life had emerged. Before drinking from any stream or lake, they would offer prayers of gratitude. They held special ceremonies at the shores of great lakes and rivers, acknowledging the water spirits and asking for their continued blessing. As the first people's understanding deepened, they began to recognize that every aspect of their daily life was potentially sacred. Working in the gardens became a form of prayer. Preparing food became a ceremony of transformation. Even the simple act of walking across the land became an opportunity to acknowledge their relationship with Turtle Island and all its inhabitants. The twins observed these developments with wonder and pride. The first people had exceeded their expectations, becoming not just survivors, but active participants in the ongoing creation of the world. Through their ceremonies and daily practices, they were weaving themselves into the sacred story of Turtle Island, ensuring that the wisdom of the beginning times would never be forgotten. As Turtle Island flourished with life and the first people multiplied, they discovered that stories could be kept not just with words, but with music. Every sound on Turtle Island seemed to inspire a song: the wind in the pines, the rush of water over stones, the calls of birds at dawn, and even the distant rumble of thunder across the hills. These natural melodies stirred something deep in the hearts of the people. Song became a way to remember, to celebrate, and to heal. It began with quiet humming as families worked together beside rivers, planting corn or fishing in the shallows. Soon, melodies arose that wove their gratitude, hopes, and dreams into music that drifted over fields on gentle breezes. The people sang songs to greet the sunrise, thanking the east for a new day and the warmth that awakened the world. Children invented songs of play, echoing the chirps of frogs at twilight or the joyous trills of hidden songbirds. These became lullabies, humming softly around firesides as the stars twinkled overhead. As their songs grew more complex, the people began using instruments, simple at first, made from reeds plucked from wetlands, hollowed gourds, and turtle shells gently tapped with sticks smoothed by water. Drums echoed the heartbeat of the land itself, their rhythms steady and grounding, reminding everyone of the vast shell beneath their feet. Flutes made from river cane carried the high, sweet notes of birds and the sigh of wind through open forest glades. Rattles filled with stones from both gentle and rugged places mingled the spirits of Sapling and Flint in every shake. It wasn't long before song and ceremony intertwined. The planting songs promised the earth that each seed placed in the ground would grow with hope and care. The hunting songs honored the deer and elk, calling on their spirits to forgive and guide so none would suffer needlessly. Healing songs learned from bear and old storytellers wove the voices of wind and water into prayers for the sick. These songs weren't rushed. They rose and fell, sometimes slow like the pull of the tides, sometimes sharp and bright like the crack of spring ice melting in the sun. Each season brought its own songs. Summer's music was lively, filled with rippling notes that matched the busy hum of bees and the rush of river currents beneath full moons. In autumn, voices deepened with the coming dark, singing thanks for full baskets and safe shelter after the harvest. Winter especially became a time for soft songs sung in circles, the fire's glow reflecting in attentive eyes. Children learned the sacred verses then, hearing the story of Turtle Island's birth from their very first winters, each generation adding a verse or harmony of their own. The songs of Turtle Island traveled. Messengers wandered between settlements, carrying new verses, new melodies, new rhythms to distant families. Sometimes a single song would echo from mountain to mountain, picked up by voices far apart but unified by purpose and shared memory. Other times, unique tunes would spring up, born of a particular river bend, a beloved grove, a thunderstorm experienced together, and would remain in the hearts of only a handful, but always celebrated, always cherished. Sapling loved these songs. On early mornings he would sit among the people, feeling the gentle pull of their harmonies weaving beauty through all they touched. He believed that song was a gift from the sky world, a memory, perhaps, of how the winds and stars themselves once sang together before the world had solid form. Flint, though less openly moved, also listened, sometimes pausing in his wanderings through rugged places to let a strong rhythm or a haunting melody carry him back to childhood when he and his brother were raised by the animals. Old Turtle smiled to hear these voices, young and old, brave and shy, blending together above his enduring mossy shell. Song, he understood, was the thread that wove all life on Turtle Island into a single, living tapestry, a tapestry that included not just the people, but the land, the water, the wind, and every spirit, past and present. The people noticed something magical sometimes. Their music changed things. Singing together could calm a frightened animal, bring gentle rain, or make crops flourish even after a harsh start to the season. The songs seemed to carry the power of the world's story, strengthening the bonds between people and place, between the twins and all that they had shaped. Every ceremony became deeper when sung, every story more enduring, every day a little more beautiful. And so Turtle Island became not just a place of stories and ceremonies, but a place of constant song, a gentle, powerful music that echoed through valleys and over ridges, as old and as new as the world itself. As generations passed on Turtle Island, the first people grew in number and began to spread across the vast lands that stretched in every direction. What had started as small family groups living near the original landing place of Skywoman gradually expanded into tribes, clans, and eventually great nations that covered the length and breadth of the continent. Each group carried with them the sacred stories of their origins, but as they settled in different regions, they began to develop their own unique ways of understanding and telling these ancient tales. Some people moved northward, where Flint's influence was strongest during the long winter months. In these harsh but beautiful lands of ice and snow, they learned to hunt the great white bears and seals, to build homes from blocks of ice, and to navigate by the dancing lights that played across the northern sky. Their versions of the Turtle Island story emphasized the importance of endurance, cooperation, and respect for the powerful spirits of winter. They remembered Muskrat's brave dive not just as an act of courage, but as a lesson about how even the smallest among them could accomplish great things when the survival of the community was at stake. Other groups traveled south to the warm lands where flowers bloomed year-round and fruit hung heavy on the trees. In these regions, blessed by Sapling's gentlest touch, the people developed sophisticated systems of agriculture, building great cities and creating elaborate calendars based on the movements of the stars. Their telling of the creation story focused on Sky Woman's gift of the seeds and the miracle of growth and abundance. They saw themselves as gardeners of the world, responsible for nurturing and protecting the green life that sustained all creatures. To the west, some people followed the setting sun across vast plains where enormous herds of buffalo moved like brown rivers across the grasslands. These people became nomadic hunters, learning to live in harmony with the great herds and following them across hundreds of miles as the seasons changed. Their version of the Turtle Island story emphasized the importance of movement and change, seeing in Sky Woman's fall from the heavens a lesson about embracing new possibilities even when they seemed frightening or unknown. In the east, where the sun rose each morning over vast waters that reminded the people of the original endless ocean, communities developed along rivers and coastlines. They became skilled fishermen and traders, using waterways as highways to connect distant settlements. Their telling of the creation story honored the water animals who had helped Sky Woman, and they maintained especially strong connections to the spirits of rivers, lakes, and seas. As these different groups adapted to their varied environments, they developed distinct languages, customs, and ways of life. The northern people learned to work with ice and snow, creating tools and shelters that could withstand the fiercest blizzards. The southern people became master builders, constructing temples and cities that reached toward the sky. The western people perfected the art of hunting and developed deep spiritual connections to the animal spirits. The eastern people became traders and diplomats, skilled at building relationships between distant communities. Yet, despite their differences, all these peoples maintained their connection to the original story of Turtle Island. When representatives from different nations met for trade or ceremony, they would recognize the common threads in each other's creation stories. The details might vary. Some emphasized different animals, others focused on different aspects of the twins' work, but the core truth remained the same. They all understood that they lived on the back of a great turtle, that their world had been created through sacrifice and cooperation, and that they were all descendants of Sky Woman who had fallen from the heavens carrying seeds of life. These gatherings between different nations became important occasions for sharing not just goods and information, but stories and songs. A northern hunter might learn a southern planting song and carry it back to his people, where it would be adapted to fit their own customs and environment. A western trader might hear an eastern fishing tale and understand something new about her own relationship to the water spirits. Through these exchanges, the story of Turtle Island continued to grow and evolve, becoming richer and more complex with each generation. The twins watched this spreading and diversification of their people with fascination and pride. They could see that each group had found ways to honor both aspects of their dual nature, the creative, nurturing spirit of Sapling and the challenging, transformative energy of Flint. The northern people faced Flint's harsh winters with courage and ingenuity, while honoring Sapling's gifts of cooperation and care. The southern people enjoyed Sapling's abundant growing seasons while accepting Flint's challenges of floods and storms that tested their engineering and adaptation skills. Old Turtle felt the footsteps of all these different peoples walking across his shell. and he was pleased by the diversity of life that now flourished in every corner of Turtle Island. The world had become far more complex and interesting than anyone could have imagined when Sky Woman first fell from the heavens. Yet the fundamental balance remained intact. The creative tension between harmony and challenge, between cooperation and independence, between tradition and innovation that had always been the heart of life on Turtle Island. As Turtle Island's nations flourished, each people realized that preserving wisdom was crucial for the survival and growth of their communities. It was not enough for stories to be spoken and songs to be sung. Much would be forgotten if not carefully remembered and taught. So across the land, special people arose, keepers of knowledge, trusted elders, storytellers, and shamans, whose sacred duty was to carry the memory of the people and the island from one generation to the next. In the cold north, ancient women and men learned to read the pattern of the snow, the shape of animal tracks, and secrets written in the stars. They memorized the great migrations, the ways to build a home from ice, and the healing properties of rare, tough plants that managed to survive in frozen ground. Using knots in cords or intricate beadwork, they recorded years of abundance or hunger. When times were especially harsh, the northern keepers knew prayers and stories to strengthen the hearts of their people, reminding each child that the spirit of Muskrat and Old Turtle lived within all who endured. In southern lands, keepers of knowledge used elaborate pictographs. On bark, stone, and clay, they marked the seasons, migrations, harvests, and great gatherings. These images spoke of Sky Woman's seeds, the sacred union of corn, beans, and squash, and the stories of how the first cities were built. The southern wisdom keepers were also skilled herbalists, passing down the recipes for medicines drawn from a rich earth. They led ceremonies that invoked Sapling's bounty, teaching future generations to give back to the land with every harvest. To the west, the Great Plains and shifting herds meant most stories were carried in memory and in dance. Elders taught young people songs that encoded knowledge, the locations of water in arid lands, the meaning behind buffalo's flight, and the constellations that guided long journeys. The keepers of the plains taught that every hunt must be remembered with gratitude and respect, and that Old Turtle's shell echoed beneath the feet of every migrating animal. Through lively festivals, these stories danced in the hearts of the next generation. In the east, where rivers met the ocean, keepers carved signs on trees and rocks along well-traveled paths, creating a living map that moved with the changing world. They memorized the tides, the spawning times of fish, and the hidden places where medicines grew strongest. Some were chosen at birth to carry memories of diplomacy, healing, or prophecy. During long winters or times of illness, the Eastern Wisdom Keepers retold the story of Turtle Island's birth and recited every detail, from the plummet of Sky Woman to Muskrat's tiny, determined paws, ensuring that no memory was ever lost to silence. Everywhere on Turtle Island, children grew up hearing these stories and learning from the Wisdom Keepers. As part of their coming of age, each person learned a song, a tale, or a skill, a rite that connected them to the whole lineage of their ancestors. Sometimes it was the story of how Old Turtle lifted his shell, sometimes a dance mimicking the dive of Muskrat, sometimes a prayer whispered as tobacco smoke rose to the sky, joining Sky Woman among the stars. These keepers did not work alone. The people revered them and gave them support so they could devote their lives to knowledge and service. Villagers organized feasts for the elders, and special days marked the telling of the most sacred stories when everyone from the youngest child to the oldest grandparent listened in reverent silence. Even the twins, Sapling and Flint, became subjects of prayer and invocation among the keepers. Their endless dance was seen not as a rivalry, but as a balanced force that shaped the fate of every generation. With each passing season, Turtle Island grew wiser. Its people learned not just to survive on the land, but to cherish it, to remember where everything came from, and to honor the sacrifices and bravery that had made life possible. Through the keepers, the island's memory grew strong, like trees with roots that reach ever deeper and branches that stretch toward all directions. The ancient pact between sky and earth, between animal and human, between gentleness and challenge, would never be forgotten. As the people of Turtle Island grew in wisdom and experience, their relationship with the spirits of the land deepened. They had always honored the great forces that shaped their world, the memory of Sky Woman's journey, the sacrifice of Muskrat, the strength of Old Turtle, and the balance between Sapling and Flint. But with each generation, the people became increasingly attuned to the presence of lesser spirits, living energies woven into every rock, tree, stream, and cloud. From the towering pines in the north came whispers of ancient tree spirits. Hunters and gatherers learned to listen for guidance in the creak of branches and the rustle of needles in winter wind. The trees were more than just shelter or fuel. They became wise elders, guardians who watched over the animals and the people with silent patience. In the shadow of these giants, people left offerings of tobacco or sweet grass, asking for safety and insight before venturing into the deep forests. Across southern fields, flower and crop spirits danced in the morning breeze. Young children learned from elders to walk gently and greet each bloom with gratitude. The spirits here were playful, often seen as bright hummingbirds or gentle breezes that teased the tall stalks of corn and left dew on squash blossoms. During planting and harvest seasons, the South's people sang to their crops, inviting spirits to ensure abundance and protect against storms or drought. The vast plains and mountains of the West held their own wild and fierce spirits. Thunderbirds lived high in the storm clouds, their powerful wings beating rain and lightning into the world. Children grew up watching for the signs of thunderbird battles, blackening skies, and thunder that echoed the voice of Flint. Buffalo and prairie dog spirits taught scouts how to find water or sense disasters. The wisdom keepers told stories of how the mountain spirits had once wrestled with Flint, shaping the land into dramatic peaks and fast rivers that challenged every traveler. In the east, water spirits moved through rivers, lakes, and the endless ocean. Fishermen sought their blessing before casting nets, and families built their homes near water, knowing spirits would protect them if honored with respect and ceremony. The East's people often spotted spirit animals, otters playing in the surf, beavers building dams, and mysterious fish seen only in dreams. The tellers spoke of the water as the cradle of creation, the first home of every living thing, and the keeper of memory connecting all people to the original world of endless waves. At night, when fires burned low and stars gleamed above, the people listened for the voices of ancestors carried on the wind. Sometimes they felt the gentle touch of Sky Woman herself, her spirit moving between the world she left behind and the sky world above. Sometimes they felt the rumble of Flint's challenge or the embrace of Sapling's comfort. Children grew up knowing that everything, wind, stone, tree, beast, and human held spirit, a force that animated life and connected them to a sacred whole. As the people grew more aware of these spirits, they became experts at interpreting signs and omens. The appearance of a rare bird, the whisper of wind through grass, the dance of light on water, all could carry meaning. Shamans and healers taught others to recognize these messages, to gather the wisdom of the spirits, and to respond with humility and gratitude. No decision was made without first consulting the spirits and seeking guidance for paths to be taken, weather to expect, and troubles to avoid. With this growing reverence, daily life became ever more intertwined with the invisible world. Every act, hunting, fishing, planting, building, loving, grieving, became a ceremony. Even laughter and tears were seen as gifts to the spirits, ways of acknowledging the profound connection between all things. The keepers of knowledge preserved these traditions, updating and expanding their songs and stories to help every new generation recognize and communicate with the spirits that shared Turtle Island with them. In this way, the land became not just a place to live, but a living presence, a place filled with voices, memories, and magic, always waiting to teach those who paused, listened, and honored the sacred story that shaped their world. The world of Turtle Island was always shifting, for the balance between Sapling and Flint meant change was constant. Some years were marked by abundance, fields heavy with corn, forests thick with berries, flocks and herds multiplying under Sapling's gentle care. Other years brought difficulty, late frosts, fierce storms, hungry wolves on the prowl, and rivers that swelled beyond their banks after thunderous rain. Each trial reminded the people that life was a cycle, a dance between challenge and comfort, and that they were a part of something far greater than themselves. Yet not all hardships came from the land or sky. As the first peoples grew and spread, new challenges arose from within, tests of the heart and spirit. Sometimes villages argued over hunting grounds, or families from different nations competed for the best fishing waters. Jealousies flared, misunderstandings took root, and words unwisely spoken sometimes led to wounds deeper than those left by any predator's claw. When these troubles arose, the wisdom keepers gathered the people around council fires. Elders listened to every perspective, no matter how small the grievance. Young and old, hunter and healer, all were given the chance to speak, for it was believed that every voice carried a spirit, and even a child's insight could be a message from the ancestors or the land itself. The keepers reminded the people of their origins, how Sky Woman had fallen from above, not to rule or divide, but to nurture and unite. They retold the story of Muskrat's sacrifice, of Old Turtle's patience, and of the twins' contest. All life is made of difference, they would say, but our balance is sacred. Disagreement is not a failing, but an invitation to listen and grow. These words anchored people in humility and respect, especially when emotions ran high. Sometimes the twins themselves would appear in dreams or visions during troubled times. Sapling would whisper comfort and encourage gentle words and gestures, a new planting at the border, a feast shared between once quarreling neighbors. Flint would urge honesty and the courage to face what was hardest, a willingness to admit fault, to ask forgiveness, to accept necessary change. The shamans taught that healing could only come when both spirits were honored, when truth was spoken bravely and kindness extended with open hands. Communities learned rituals for reconciliation. Songs of forgiveness were sung at sunrise and sunset, echoing across valleys and riverbanks. Dances of renewal traced patterns in the dust that reminded all of the cycles of the moon and sun, always parting, always returning. Gifts were exchanged, a blanket woven with new colors, a carved shell from the distant coast, dried berries, or a stone shaped by many winters on the mountainside. Each gift said, "I remember the story. I choose to add something beautiful to it, even during hard times." Healers worked magic to restore broken friendship and harmony. A bitter quarrel might be ended by bathing in water blessed with cedar and sweet grass, letting anger drift away like ash on flowing currents. Grief for lost kin was soothed with drums, and the shared heartbeat of a village gathered close, every voice promising to watch over those left behind. Through these trials of the heart, the people of Turtle Island became strong not just in body but in spirit. They endured the world's hardships together, learning that every test brought the opportunity to choose compassion, courage, or understanding. The land was full of lessons, and so was the life they built together, a living testament to the belief that the truest strength is not in never breaking, but in always finding ways to heal. And so, Turtle Island endured storm and sunshine, discord and peace, struggle and celebration. Its people, guided by story and song, learned to hold each other through every trial, their hearts as enduring as the island itself, rooted deep and reaching always toward the next dawn. In every village on Turtle Island, a special reverence grew for the world of dreams. People understood that dreams were not just the random wanderings of a sleeping mind, but sacred journeys, a time when the spirit could travel the hidden highways between earth and sky, past and future, seen and unseen. Dreams could carry messages from the ancestors, from animal spirits, from Sky Woman herself, or even from the deep wisdom of Turtle Island's land and waters. From a young age, children were taught to honor their dreams. Each morning, families shared their dreams with one another, sometimes discovering signs for how best to live that day. A warning of change in the wind, a promise of healing for someone ill, or news of an animal migration that would soon bring food. If a dream showed muskrat diving or old turtle rising from the water, it was considered a blessing or guiding omen. The wisdom keepers and shamans were experts in dream interpretation. They held special ceremonies where the whole community would gather, lying together in a circle and allowing their spirits to wander collectively. Sometimes, a single dream would unite many minds with the same image: a lake filled with fish, a tree heavy with sacred fruit, a storm rolling over the hills. These shared dreams wove the people tightly together, giving everyone a sense of belonging and purpose. Dreaming was also a way to heal. When someone suffered, whether from illness, grief, or loss, healers might guide them into the dream world using gentle songs, smoke of cedar and sage, or rhythmic drumming to help the spirit travel beyond pain. In dreams, ancestors might appear, offering comfort or advice and showing the way to restoration. Sometimes Sapling came to teach patience, or Flint arrived to spark the courage for change. When the dream journey ended, the person would return to waking life renewed, carrying wisdom they could share with family and friends. On the longest nights of winter, dream journeys became central to community life. As snow drifted outside and firelight flickered on the walls, elders and children alike would lie quietly, listening for the gentle pulse of the drum. They imagined themselves flying over Turtle Island with eagle, swimming the rivers with fish, or burrowing beneath earth with mole. Through these journeys, people came to understand not just the land, but the spirit woven through all places, always alive, always close. Dreams were also the place where new stories were born. Entire songs might come from a dream, music no one had ever heard before, verses gifted by unseen spirits. Wisdom keepers eagerly recorded these gifts, adding them to their growing stores of knowledge. A powerful dream could shape a whole year, inspiring new ceremonies, guiding the planting and hunting, or offering ways to resolve challenges between nations. Sometimes, shamans undertook more difficult journeys, traveling deep into the dream to seek guidance for the hardest problems facing their people. They might meet Sky Woman in a luminous meadow, or see the twins, Sapling and Flint, standing together at the edge of a storm. These dreams often carried lessons about balance, reminding the people that every challenge had the possibility of resolution, and that the world, though complex, was always guided by sacred story. From these dream journeys, the people of Turtle Island learned that wisdom does not only come in daylight and waking hours. Some truths live only in the world of spirit, arriving softly when the mind is quiet and open. And just as Muskrat dove into the darkness to return with Earth, so could a dreamer travel into the unknown and return with hope and guidance for all. In honoring dreams and spirit journeys, the people grew close to the heart of Turtle Island itself, knowing that the world, awake and asleep, was ever alive with messages waiting to be heard. In the rhythm of Turtle Island, every life followed the circle: beginning, growth, transformation, and return. The people understood that their own lives mirrored the movement of the moon and the seasons, the migration of animals, and the blossoming and fading of plants. The wisdom keepers taught that to honor the full circle was to honor the story itself, the journey taken by every spirit since time's dawn. Children celebrated the spring of their lives with rituals of welcome and blessing. Their laughter filled the woods and meadows, often echoing the song of birds building nests or the playful leap of deer through young grass. Elders created small ceremonies to mark each milestone: first steps, first fish caught, first night spent beneath the stars. Sapling's gentle spirit encircled these beginnings, reminding all that every life was a sacred seed planted on Turtle Island's fertile soil. As youth became adulthood, new gifts awakened. Young people learned the practical skills of the land: planting, hunting, weaving, building, storytelling, and healing. The trials of the heart, jealousies, disagreements, griefs, and disappointments were recognized as passages, necessary storms in the growth of a strong tree. These moments were marked with dances and feasts, gifts and storytelling, all held beneath Old Turtle's watchful shell. When adults became elders, they entered the autumn of their years, a season of wisdom and reflection. Elders sat quietly with children and youth, gathering them close to pass on secrets, share history, and guide the community with the lessons of long living. Their voices were steady as river stones, honored and sought out as sources of healing and reconciliation. The circle meant that those who once learned from parents and grandparents now became the teachers, completing the sacred loop. Death was never seen as an end, but as a migration into another realm. The passing of an elder was marked by long, gentle ceremonies. Stories were told of their life work accomplished, kindness given, challenges faced, and gifts shared. Tobacco smoke and songs rose to the sky world, where it was said the spirit of the departed would rest beside Sky Woman, watching over loved ones left behind. The people honored the return. Everything that was born would one day return to the earth, nourishing new life and possibility. The bodies of plants and animals, even people, were given back, gently buried with songs and prayers, so their spirits would mingle with earth, water, and wind, forever part of the world's living tapestry. This return was celebrated, not feared. It was the gratitude of the circle, a way for all things to continue. The cycle played out in every aspect of life. The rivers flowed to the sea, then rose as rain, feeding streams and lakes anew. Trees released their leaves in autumn, which nourished the soil for next spring. Buffalo herds multiplied, roamed, and aged, their passing building prairies richer with every year. Even the circle of song became a promise that each new melody, each new verse, each changed rhythm would someday be woven back into the larger chorus of Turtle Island. Sapling and Flint saw the circle not as a limitation, but as the spirit's greatest strength. They encouraged celebrations at every stage: birth and naming, coming of age, building a home, loss and letting go, and every reunion that followed. The keepers taught that to honor the circle was to maintain the health of the people, the land, and every spirit within. As the circle spun, Turtle Island endured. Its people learned, changed, grieved, rejoiced, and remembered. In times of plenty and times of challenge, the circle was the heart of every story, the guide for every action, and the promise that life would always continue, moving through light and darkness, returning always to the beginning. And so the story of Turtle Island continues, as it has for countless generations, as it will for countless more to come. The great turtle still carries the world on his shell, patient and enduring, his ancient heart beating in rhythm with the tides and seasons. Sky Woman's spirit still watches from above, her love flowing down like starlight to touch every leaf, every stone, every creature that calls Turtle Island home. The memory of brave little Muskrat's dive lives on in every act of courage, every moment when someone small accomplishes something great through determination and hope. Sapling and Flint continue their eternal dance across the land, their opposing forces still shaping the world with each passing day. Where Sapling walks, flowers bloom and streams run clear. Where Flint passes, mountains rise and storms test the strength of all living things. Together, they maintain the balance that makes life possible, the tension between comfort and challenge, between creation and change, between harmony and growth that keeps Turtle Island alive and vibrant. The people of Turtle Island have spread far beyond the original shores where Sky Woman first landed. They have become hundreds of nations, thousands of communities, each with their own languages and customs, their own ways of understanding the sacred story that connects them all. Some live in great cities that reach toward the sky. Others follow the ancient paths of their ancestors, moving with the seasons and the herds. All carry within them the memory of their origins, the knowledge that they are part of something larger than themselves. The animals continue to share their wisdom with those who listen. Bears still teach about healing plants and the importance of rest. Eagles still carry prayers to the sky world on their powerful wings. Wolves still demonstrate the strength that comes from working together. And in quiet ponds and streams, The descendants of Muskrat continue to dive deep, reminding everyone that courage comes in all sizes and that the smallest action can change the world. The plants that grew from Sky Woman's body still nourish the people of Turtle Island. Corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters still grow together in gardens across the land, their roots intertwined, their growth supporting each other just as the people themselves support one another. Tobacco still carries prayers upward, its sacred smoke bridging the gap between earth and sky. Sweet grass, sage, and cedar still purify and heal, their fragrances calling the spirits to bless and protect. The stories continue to be told around fires under starlit skies. Children still gather at the feet of elders to hear about Sky Woman's fall, about Muskrat's brave dive, about the contest between the twins that shaped the world. Each telling adds something new while preserving something ancient. Each generation finds its own meaning in the old words, its own wisdom in the familiar tales. The ceremonies continue to mark the turning of the seasons and the passages of life. Songs still rise to greet the dawn and bid farewell to the day. Drums still echo the heartbeat of the earth. Dancers still trace the patterns of wind and water, of growth and change, of all the forces that keep the world in motion. The spirits of the land, water, and sky continue to speak to those who know how to listen. They offer guidance in dreams and visions. They send signs in the flight of birds and the rustle of leaves. They remind the people that everything is connected, that every action has consequences, that every choice matters in the great web of life that spans all of Turtle Island. And through it all, the fundamental truth remains unchanged, that this world was born from sacrifice and cooperation, from the willingness of beings to help one another even at great cost to themselves. The story teaches that strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together. It shows that wisdom comes from listening to all voices, even the smallest. It demonstrates that balance is not a destination but a journey, requiring constant attention and care. As long as there are people to remember, as long as there are children to learn, as long as there are elders to teach, the story of Turtle Island will continue. It will grow and change and adapt, just as the land itself grows and changes with each passing season. But its heart will remain the same, a story of connection, of responsibility, of hope, and of the unbreakable bonds that tie all living things together on this beautiful sacred island that rests forever on the shell of the great turtle, floating in the endless waters of memory and dream. The story never ends. It only continues, like the circle of life itself, always returning to the beginning, always moving toward the future, always reminding us that we are all part of something magnificent and eternal. The living story of Turtle Island. There we have it, the complete story of Turtle Island, told across 20 sections as a gentle, detailed narration, perfect for listeners seeking both relaxation and wonder. From Sky Woman's fall through the creation of the first people to the eternal continuation of the sacred story, we've woven together the threads of this ancient and beautiful creation myth that has sustained indigenous peoples across North America for countless generations. Good night.